The biggest question we are left with after the curtain call at this show might certainly be, what the fuck? But we covered that in the first video. More realistically, I'm going for why? Why is Macman subjecting the fanbase to this grindhouse torture chamber for the audience that has supported him for so long? The show is rooted in horror, it's true, and it really is horrifying, what they've done, that is. Well, I've collected all the public statements I can find about why, and what they hope to achieve. So maybe, just maybe, we can get some closure. I suspect this won't end well, and we will not be satisfied with the answer to the massacre of our beloved story, shredded so carelessly in front of us, while we were obligated to clap. Let's see what Macman said when they sliced the orchestra pit to half the size after the pandemic.
With the orchestra size being reduced from 27 to 14, there was outcry on social media, with the musicians' union also issuing a statement saying it was sad and disappointed by the plans. McIntosh stood by the move, stating that, "Am I sorry? I'm sorry they're upset.
I'm sorry. You think you deserve an apology.
But I do find it odd why musicians would want to keep doing the same thing, year after year. I believe, we should not be holding jobs for actors or musicians ad infinitum. This is not the civil service, we're creating art." He also added that with a margin so fine, no one in their right mind would consider in this day and age putting a 30-piece orchestra in this theater.
Yes. With two short sentences, he manages hacking an absolute whopper of a loogie onto the boots of all the musicians, actors, and audience members, who have oddly kept doing the same thing year after the billions of dollars this show has raked in over the decades. But there is not, and nor will there ever be, a replacement for actual humans, playing instruments in a symphony, and your willingness to sacrifice the quality of these tunes to the almighty dollar could piss someone off. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you, the opposition's argument, entitled, "Not Your Granny's Phantom of the Opera." Now I don't know why he's bringing my gran into this fucking mess, but it sounds like he's getting defensive and self-conscious about the decision-making here. I can hear a distinct gurgling sound as I prepare to read what he's got to say, which can only be described as another percolating chonker of a spitwad, this time, aimed directly at my grandma's velvet slippers. You backstabbing, penny pincher. Don't pretend like Maria Bjornsson wasn't hand-fucking-picked by you.
And I thought, the only way we can make this be real and have an emotional impact is if I get a wonderful design which takes you into the world. And into my head, who knows why, Maria Bjornsson came into my head. I didn't really know her very well, but I felt in my bones that we could never make the show work unless I had Maria. And of course, Hal Prince and Gillian Lynne, staged her visual imagery brilliantly, but she was there along with the composer in the creation of this piece.
You knew she was an absolute wizard, for over-the-top costumes, pageantry and luxurious scenery.
Where Cameron came in was to introduce us all to Maria Bjornsson, because he had an instinct that Maria, because he'd seen a production of hers of The Tempest, which had a sort of fair amount of illusion in it, and he thought that she could be good for this, and then we got cracking with the design with her fairly early on.
She actually was the most brilliant. She had a tremendous flair for this. I mean, it's something like she was seized by it, and she I think it was her best work.
The designer has created an extraordinary theatrical moment. When the prince kisses the sleeping princess, she wakes, and a huge spider's web seems to blow away.
Okay, where you go?
Go.
Go, Bob.
She was literally famous for the aesthetic you criticize as looking like Tune. But is that an insult? Is something wrong with my eyes? This looks pretty dope to me. So riddle me this. Macman justifies his heinous hacking and slashing by insisting it's a smaller production for transportability, and then immediately puts his salesman face on and screams, to the top of his lungs, that his new Phantom is both bigger, despite its smallness, and the same as the old one, despite the fact he calls it new. Cameron Mackintosh, the magician of magicians. This is really the start of the nonsense. There's so many examples of this scattered thought process about this production, that to try and nail down what exactly the intention was is hard to pinpoint. If it's smaller, it cannot be bigger also. If it's the same production, then it cannot also be new. If you were going for realism and grittiness, you best pick a story that hasn't been steeped in absurdity for over a century. The original production is preposterous. Obviously, it's a f***ing mythology. The Phantom of the Opera didn't actually happen.
I know what to do about it. I'll kill them both.
Oh, come on now.
I'm teasing. Probably the only one I need to kill is her.
Are you going to kill me now?
Everyone dies. I only choose the time and place for a few.
If you wanted Maria Bjornsson's sets and costumes, you shouldn't have ordered them off Wish.com. But pointing out these double standards isn't enough for me. I've got to figure out why they exist, because to me, this oxymoronic PR machine sure seems like a distraction from what is actually happening here.
The show travels in 20 trailers complete. Our load-in process is 3 days long. We hire between 75 and 90 stagehands depending upon the market and what the individual challenges are. The chandelier weighs about 2,000 pounds roughly. There's a winch truss above it that weighs another 2,000 pounds. There's pyro and lighting effects inside the chandelier. The main scenic element for the show are two large walls that track in a circle around the center of the stage. The two together weigh about 10,000 pounds total. Some of the other large set pieces we have in the tour are the two opera boxes, which are 24 feet long individually and 8.5 feet wide.
No built-in narration for our beloved replica tour, but I found a few articles online giving us the details from bygone years of what it took to load in the show. Somewhere between 18 and 20 semi-trucks to transport it. And the second heaviest piece is under a ton, being the portcullis. The massive curtains, lavish costumes and mannequins obviously add plenty to the tally, along with the masquerade stairs, which are actually deceptively thin, and it lays almost perfectly flat for storage. The biggest difference I found in the two productions load-in is the time. I'm fairly sure it took a week to load in the original production. For the difference of 4 days, honestly, I don't think it was worth the butchering. But I'll let you decide. It is also worth mentioning that the original tour went on, as far as I can tell, for almost 20 years in America. In that time, every single theater that could have hosted it made every change to the building the production needed. Anchors in the structure for the chandelier, a deeper stage, etc. In some cases these theaters pumped out tens of millions of dollars to do this. Because in the end they knew the ticket sales would more than make up for it. And they were absolutely right. Those structural changes don't just patch up over time. Those theaters can still host the original, but what they couldn't do is just plop a 5-ton rotating gimmick onto the center of the stage on a whim. So in many cases the theaters that had already spent so much to host the original had to go back, reinforce the stage, and then host this new catastrophe instead. While the trapdoors, depth of stage and the anchors in the ceiling literally collect dust. I found this video of the guy who's been working the chandelier at the Majestic forever, and he says quite explicitly
It weighs about 1,500 pounds.
1,500 freedom units. That's 1 ton. So I'll trust this guy over the rest of the clickbaity articles, since he has to make sure everything is running right with it mechanically. So I think it's fair to say that in terms of physically scaling down the production, they've failed, as everything is honestly quite comparable with the exception only of 4 days difference.
Cameron McIntosh writes, just before Maria died at a tragically early age, she and I had started discussing a different set design, one that would do more, to contrast the Phantom's darker backstage world with that of the traditional opera world on stage. Andrew agreed that it was time to give Phantom a fresh look, so in 2008 I approached theater and opera designer Paul Brown, to see if he were interested in taking over the baton from Maria. It turned out that Maria had a special place in Paul's life, as at the beginning of his career he had been a young assistant to her at the Royal Opera House. The result of Paul's long-developed ideas for this project is a new version of Phantom that uses a more visceral dramatic approach to create a visual feast, giving audiences the chance to see their favorite musical all over again through new eyes.
Bullshit. Isn't it convenient that, when someone dies, you can just say anything you like about what you were both talking about doing, and they can't correct the record? Maria knew her work was absolutely flawless, and the show has the pedigree and the legacy to prove it. She, unlike you, knew not to mess with perfection. Her work stimulates the imagination, respects one's intelligence, gives space for the eyes to move, and brings depth to emotion with the dark depths of the stage utilized as a context to everything placed on it. What you've done is stimulated my memory of what is missing from the original costumes with the cheap knockoff brand you ordered off Amazon. Insulted our intelligence by cramming every millimeter of the sets with frivolous decoration. Made the entire theater feel claustrophobic, because you crammed said frivolous decorations inside this cylindrical gimmick. And absolutely demolished any semblance of the original blocking by our Hal. Leaving us starving for the affectionate, friendly or sensual contact the story dictates.
Turn your face away from the gaslight of day. You little lion, you little viper, now you can...
And finally you've left no place at all for our eyes to perch in the darkness of the stage, to let our imaginations bask in the actors' vocal masterpieces. No. We get to stare at this Hawaiian bar decoration, and imagine the Phantom, sipping on sad pina coladas, instead. Let's see what Hal might have to say about this. I dug up an article from 2006, when one of the many replica North American tours was busting the doors off of theaters everywhere. In fact, one of the articles I found described how the Phantom reinvigorated the local economies of rundown towns and theatrical centers, so completely, it brought these places, literally, back to life. Can any other show, or phenomenon, claim such a feat? But I digress. The words of Hal Prince. There have been professional, non-replica productions that go ham on the sparks, and don't use the original sets or costumes. He could have taken notes. It still captures the essence of the story perfectly. Is it bigger and better? No. But it's goddamned good. because you can feel that all of the material was reverently handled, even though the budget wasn't Broadway caliber. I mourn, to this day, not being able to see the Las Vegas production of this show. The Venetian Theatre, itself, was literally built to accommodate the production. Parts of the proscenium extend out into the rest of the theatre, and they're still there to this day, as well as this absolutely mind-boggling chandelier. In the auction scene, it starts out in pieces around the theatre, and then with engineering brilliance, the pieces rotate around during the overture to finally settle and sink together and then rise to the ceiling, glowing like brand new. Amazing doesn't cover it. It's chilling. This story can absolutely accommodate a smaller scale, and a truly bigger and better production, as well, and anything in between. Somehow, Macman ended up, not only nowhere in this very accommodating range, he ends up completely off the board and somewhere in the goddamned bushes. If you'd stuck to your concession of giving the chandelier more pizzazz, and focused on doing that to the entire show, we might have ended up with something more palatable. Theatre is for the ridiculous, the fantastical, the impossible. Give me fantasy, give me myth, legends, folklore and retellings. Give me the melodrama, the insane, and flamboyant. Give me the sparklers, lightning bolts, projectors, turning stages and the multi-layered costumes that weigh 100 pounds. Give me historical fallacies and make-believe. Give me fur and feathers and paint and fangs. Give me Tornado on f***ing tour in a ball. For Pete's sake, give me the damn spandex too. It is not my opinion that this is better, it's an irrefutable fact. For the love of God, don't give me gritty documentaries and clog a good stage with your pretentious delusions of grandeur. Cameron Mackintosh, despite his PR machine, insisting on the show being, quote, bigger and better than ever before, it, by definition, had to be smaller and different in all the worst possible ways to reach his ultimate goal: less cost, more profits. He didn't want to pay royalties to the estates of the reposed original creators anymore. Maria, Hal and Gillian's legacy was on the chopping block for him, if it meant more green between his fingers. While Maria is alive, he does nothing but sing her praises. As soon as she dies, suddenly her work is outdated, gaudy and expensive to maintain. His disdain for the arts and the way he treats creators is abhorrent, and he doesn't deserve to profit another cent from their work. The bullshit of the whole thing is that it really is the product of someone's complete lack of vision, reverence, respect, or sentimentality, and they genuinely thought, they were making something good that would make them a lot of cash. I'll give him the last word on this topic, however. Until next time, friends.
Audiences wanted to see the same quality as we had, and it was as on Broadway, and it was worth actually spending the money and the time and the effort to have that. And I think that's been compounded with the success of Phantom. And for my part, I'm just not interested in doing anything which is in any way substandard. And for me, the road is as important as Broadway. With these shows, we're having a phenomenal run. I mean, Les Miserables and Phantom are going to probably run 4, 5, 6 years on the road. Now, that is more than most other shows ever run in London and Broadway. So for me, not to treat that with the most utter respect and gratitude would be very stupid. And I believe that that is where the future of the theatre is, because we bring new people, new audiences to fall in love with the theatre in proper scale in the country, and then hopefully in the next century they'll still come to Broadway. For me, not to treat that with the most utter respect and gratitude would be very stupid.